Hello and welcome to History for Sleep. Tonight we journey to the windswept sands of Egypt, to the shadow of monuments so massive and mysterious that they have captured human imagination for over 4,000 years. The Great Pyramids of Giza stand as silent witnesses to an ancient world, their limestone blocks rising from the desert floor like frozen mountains built by human hands. For centuries, we have marveled at their perfect geometry and wondered at the incredible feat of engineering they represent. But tonight, we will not focus on the pharaohs who commanded their construction or the sacred rituals they were built to serve. Instead, we will turn our attention to the forgotten thousands who actually built them, the workers whose calloused hands moved every stone, whose sweat soaked into the desert sand, whose voices have been lost to time. This is their story. Before we begin our journey into the lives of these ancient builders, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe. It helps support the channel and means a great deal to me. I am also always curious to know where in the world and at what time you are joining me tonight, so I would love to hear from you in the comments. And now, settle in. Let the noise of the modern world fade away, and let us travel back to a time of copper tools, wooden sledges, and the back-breaking labour that created wonders. For generations, the popular imagination painted a picture of the pyramid builders as countless slaves, whipped and driven by cruel overseers, their lives worth nothing to the god-kings they served. This image was so powerful, so deeply embedded in our understanding of ancient Egypt, that it seemed almost heretical to question it. Hollywood films showed endless lines of Hebrew slaves dragging massive blocks under the scorching sun. Historical novels describe the pyramids as monuments built on suffering, their glory forever tainted by the blood of the oppressed. But this dramatic vision, compelling as it was, contained very little truth. The real story of who built the pyramids began to emerge only in the late 20th century, when archaeologists finally turned their attention away from the tombs of kings and toward the humble villages where the workers lived. What they discovered there would revolutionize our understanding of these ancient projects and reveal a far more complex and fascinating reality than any Hollywood epic had ever imagined. The first clues came from the workers themselves, or rather from what they left behind. In 1990, an Egyptian archaeologist named Zahi Hawass was riding his horse near the Giza plateau when the animal stumbled. The horse had stepped into a hole, and when Hawass investigated, he found himself looking down into an ancient tomb. But this was not the elaborate burial chamber of a pharaoh or a wealthy noble. This was the simple grave of an ordinary worker, and it was not alone. Over the following years, excavations revealed an entire cemetery dedicated to the pyramid builders. These were not the unmarked graves of slaves worked to death and discarded. These were carefully constructed tombs, built with obvious care and respect for the deceased. The cemetery told a story that no ancient text had preserved. Here lay men and women whose bones bore the unmistakable marks of hard physical labour. Their spines showed signs of carrying heavy loads. Their arms and shoulders were enlarged from years of lifting and pulling. Some had suffered injuries that had healed, evidence that they had received medical care and lived to work another day. These were not disposable slaves, but valued workers whose contributions were recognized and honored even in death. But the cemetery was only the beginning of the revelations. Further excavations uncovered something even more remarkable: the remains of entire worker settlements. These were not the crude barracks where slaves might have been housed, but organized communities complete with bakeries, breweries, and even what appeared to be medical facilities. The scale was enormous. Archaeologists estimate that these settlements could have housed and fed thousands of workers at a time. The bakeries were particularly revealing. They were massive operations, capable of producing bread for thousands of people every day. The ovens were sophisticated, designed for maximum efficiency and output. But perhaps most significantly, the bread produced here was not the coarse, minimal ration you might expect slaves to receive. Analysis of the remains showed that the workers were eating well. They consumed beef, lamb, and fish in quantities that would have been considered luxurious by the standards of ordinary Egyptians. This was the diet of valued workers, not expendable labor. The evidence from the worker settlements painted a picture of a highly organized operation, but it also raised new questions. If these were not slaves, then who exactly were these people? How were they recruited? How were they organized? And what motivated them to undertake such back-breaking work? The answers to these questions would come from an unexpected source, the workers themselves, speaking to us across 4 millennia through the graffiti they left behind. Ancient Egyptian workers, it turns out, were great believers in leaving their mark. Throughout the pyramids and the surrounding structures, archaeologists have found hundreds of inscriptions left by the construction crews. These were not the formal hieroglyphic inscriptions of priests and scribes, but the casual markings of working people, written in a simpler script that ordinary Egyptians could read and write. And what these inscriptions revealed was extraordinary. The workers organized themselves into crews with names that sound almost modern in their competitive spirit. There were the Friends of Khufu and the Drunkards of Menkaura. There were crews called the Vigorous Gang and the Enduring Gang. These names suggest not just organization, but pride and rivalry. These were teams of workers competing with each other, taking satisfaction in their accomplishments, and identifying strongly with their group and their pharaoh. But the inscriptions revealed something even more significant about the nature of this workforce. Many of the graffiti included not just crew names, but the names and titles of individual workers. These were not anonymous slaves, but people with identities, with ranks and specializations within their crews. There were foremen and team leaders, skilled craftsmen and general laborers, all working within a complex hierarchy that recognized different levels of skill and responsibility. One inscription, found deep within the Great Pyramid itself, reads simply, "The Gang, the Friends of Khufu." It was left by workers in a chamber that no pharaoh would ever see, no priest would ever visit, and no tourist would ever admire. It was a message from workers to workers, a declaration of identity and accomplishments that they expected their fellow builders to see and understand. It speaks to a sense of community and shared purpose that would be impossible to maintain among unwilling slaves. The physical evidence from the worker settlements and cemeteries, combined with the inscriptions left by the workers themselves, began to build a picture of pyramid construction that was radically different from the traditional narrative. But there was one more piece of evidence that would complete the transformation of our understanding. This evidence came not from what the workers left behind, but from how Egyptian society itself was organized during the Pyramid Age. Ancient Egypt during the 4th dynasty, when the Great Pyramids were built, was a society at the peak of its power and prosperity. The pharaohs commanded resources on a scale that is difficult for us to imagine today. But they also ruled over a population that was, for its time, remarkably well organized and sophisticated. This was not a simple agricultural society held together by brute force, but a complex state with elaborate systems for taxation, administration, and labor management. The key to understanding pyramid construction lies in grasping how this system worked, particularly during the annual flood season of the Nile River. For several months each year, the great river would overflow its banks, inundating the farmland of Egypt with rich, fertile mud. This flooding was the foundation of Egyptian civilization, the source of the agricultural abundance that supported the kingdom. But it also created a seasonal crisis of employment. During the flood months, farmers could not work their fields. The land was underwater, and there was nothing to do but wait for the waters to recede. For a society that depended on agriculture, this represented both an opportunity and a problem. The opportunity was that thousands of workers were temporarily available for other projects. The problem was feeding and organizing this suddenly idle workforce. The pharaohs solved this problem with characteristic Egyptian efficiency. They developed a system of seasonal labor drafts that channeled the flood season workforce into massive public works projects. The most ambitious of these projects were the pyramids themselves. Rather than maintaining a permanent workforce of slaves, the pyramid builders drew their labor from this seasonal pool of temporarily unemployed farmers. This system explains many of the puzzling features of pyramid construction that had long baffled historians. It explains why the worker settlements were so large and so well organized. They needed to house and feed thousands of workers who would arrive each year with the floods and depart when the waters receded. It explains why the workers were so well fed. These were not permanent slaves, but seasonal workers whose cooperation needed to be secured and maintained. And it explains the competitive crew names and the pride evident in the workers' inscriptions. These were people working for their pharaoh and their community, not unwilling captives laboring under the lash. But understanding the seasonal nature of pyramid construction also reveals something even more remarkable about these ancient projects. The pyramids were not built by a permanent workforce toiling year after year until completion. They were built by a constantly changing population of workers, with new crews arriving each flood season and veterans returning to their farms when the waters receded. This means that over the decades it took to complete a pyramid, tens of thousands of different individuals would have participated in its construction. The implications of this revelation are staggering. The Great Pyramid of Khufu, the largest and most famous of the Giza pyramids, was not the product of a small group of oppressed slaves. It was a community effort on a scale that involved a significant portion of the entire Egyptian population. Fathers would have worked on the pyramid and then returned home to tell their sons about the experience. Those sons might have joined crews themselves in later years, continuing a family tradition of service to the pharaoh and participation in the greatest construction project of their age. This community aspect of pyramid building helps explain one of the most enduring mysteries about these ancient monuments. How did the Egyptians maintain the incredible precision and quality of construction over the many years it took to complete each pyramid? The answer lies not in the supervision of cruel overseers, but in the pride and skill of the workers themselves. Each crew brought not only their labor, but their expertise, their traditions, and their competitive spirit. Knowledge was passed down from veteran workers to newcomers, techniques were refined and perfected, and standards were maintained not through fear, but through professional pride. The seasonal workforce system also reveals the true scale of the logistical achievement that pyramid construction represented. Feeding, housing, and organizing thousands of workers for months at a time required a level of planning and administration that rivals modern industrial projects. The bakeries and breweries found at the worker settlements were not just food production facilities. They were the heart of a complex supply chain that brought resources from across Egypt to support the construction effort. Grain had to be collected from farms throughout the kingdom and transported to Giza. Cattle had to be raised and herded to the construction sites to provide the meat that sustained the workers. Fish had to be caught in the Nile and preserved for the inland construction sites. Beer, the staple drink of ancient Egypt, had to be brewed in massive quantities to keep the workforce hydrated in the desert heat. All of this required coordination between different regions of Egypt, sophisticated transportation networks, and careful timing to ensure that supplies arrived when they were needed. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of this logistical achievement was how it was sustained year after year, decade after decade, until the pyramids were complete. This was not a one-time effort, but a recurring mobilization of resources and people that had to be repeated with each flood season. The administrative systems that made this possible represent one of humanity's earliest experiments in large-scale project management, a bureaucratic achievement that was as impressive in its own way as the engineering feat of the pyramids themselves. The workers who built these monuments were not anonymous laborers lost to history. but individuals whose lives we can now glimpse through the archaeological record. Among the most fascinating discoveries are the personal possessions found in the worker settlements, objects that reveal intimate details about the people who shaped these stone giants with their bare hands. In the humble quarters where the pyramid builders lived, archaeologists have uncovered combs carved from bone, simple jewelry made from copper and stone, and gaming pieces that speak to moments of leisure stolen between long days of labor. These were not the possessions of slaves who owned nothing, but the personal belongings of people who had some control over their own lives, who could acquire and keep small treasures that made their temporary homes more comfortable. The medical evidence tells an even more compelling story. The bones of the pyramid workers show clear signs of medical treatment that would have been impossible for disposable slaves to receive. Broken bones that healed properly, evidence of surgical procedures, and signs of long-term care for workers who had suffered injuries, all point to a society that valued these people enough to invest in their health and recovery. One skeleton found in the workers' cemetery shows particularly dramatic evidence of this care. The man had suffered a severe injury to his leg, an injury so serious that it would have left him unable to perform heavy labor for months. Yet the bone shows signs of expert medical treatment and careful healing. This worker was not discarded when he became injured, but was treated, cared for, and presumably given lighter duties while he recovered. His eventual burial in the workers' cemetery suggests he lived out his life as part of the pyramid building community, valued not just for his physical strength, but as a person worthy of care and respect. The diversity of the workforce is another revelation that has emerged from recent archaeological work. The pyramid builders were not all Egyptian farmers pressed into service during flood season. Among the remains found in the worker settlements are people from across the ancient world. There were Nubians from the south, with their distinctive cultural practices and technologies. There were peoples from the Levant, bringing different skills and perspectives to the construction effort. There were nomadic peoples from the desert margins, whose knowledge of surviving in harsh conditions would have been invaluable. This diversity was not accidental, but deliberate. The pharaohs and their administrators understood that different peoples brought different skills to the massive undertaking of pyramid construction. The Nubians were renowned for their expertise in working with stone and their knowledge of quarrying techniques. The peoples of the Levant had developed sophisticated methods for moving heavy objects and organizing large work crews. The desert nomads understood how to survive and work in the harsh conditions of the Giza plateau. But integrating such a diverse workforce presented its own challenges. Different groups had different languages, different customs, different ways of organizing work and social relationships. The evidence suggests that the Egyptian administrators developed remarkably sophisticated methods for managing this diversity, creating work crews that mixed different groups while maintaining enough cultural coherence to function effectively. The crew names found in the graffiti reflect this diversity. While some crews clearly identified with Egyptian pharaohs and Egyptian values, others had names that suggest different cultural origins or mixed heritage. There were crews that seemed to have been organized along regional lines, bringing together workers from particular parts of Egypt or from specific foreign communities. Other crews appear to have been deliberately mixed, combining workers from different backgrounds in ways that would have encouraged cultural exchange and cooperation. This cultural mixing had profound effects on Egyptian society that extended far beyond the pyramid construction sites. Workers who spent seasons laboring alongside people from different cultures returned to their home communities with new ideas, new techniques, and new perspectives. The pyramid projects became, in effect, massive cultural exchanges that spread innovations and practices throughout the ancient world. The evidence for this cultural exchange is found not just in the worker settlements, but in Egyptian society more broadly during the Pyramid Age. New technologies appear in Egyptian archaeological sites during this period, technologies that can be traced to other cultures, but were adapted and improved by Egyptian craftsmen. New artistic styles emerge that show clear influences from foreign traditions. New methods of organization and administration appear that reflect the lessons learned from managing diverse workforces on massive construction projects. The scale of knowledge transfer that occurred during pyramid construction is perhaps best illustrated by the evolution of construction techniques over the course of the Pyramid Age. The earliest pyramids show clear signs of experimentation and learning. Techniques were tried, modified, and perfected through trial and error. But as more pyramids were built and more workers gained experience, the methods became increasingly sophisticated and efficient. The Great Pyramid of Khufu represents the culmination of this learning process. Its construction shows a level of precision and efficiency that could only have been achieved by workers who had perfected their techniques over generations of pyramid building. The massive blocks are fitted together with tolerances that would be impressive by modern standards. The internal chambers are aligned with astronomical precision that required sophisticated mathematical knowledge. The overall design reflects an understanding of engineering principles that took decades of practical experience to develop. But this expertise was not concentrated in the hands of a few master builders or elite architects. The evidence suggests that knowledge and skill were widely distributed among the workforce. Individual workers developed specializations that made them valuable contributors to the overall effort. Some became experts in quarrying stone, developing techniques for splitting massive blocks from the limestone cliffs with minimal waste and maximum efficiency. Others specialized in transportation, creating the systems of ramps, sledges, and rollers that moved multi-ton blocks across the desert and up the rising pyramid structure. Still others became masters of precision placement, the delicate work of positioning massive stones exactly where they needed to be in the pyramid structure. This work required not just physical strength, but mathematical understanding, spatial reasoning, and the ability to work cooperatively with large teams of other specialists. The workers who performed this role were craftsmen in the truest sense, people whose skills were honed through years of practice and whose expertise was essential to the success of the entire project. The evidence for this distributed expertise comes from the construction itself. Different sections of the pyramids show slightly different techniques and approaches, suggesting that individual work crews had some autonomy in how they accomplished their assigned tasks. Some crews developed innovative solutions to particular construction challenges, solutions that were then adopted by other crews working on different parts of the structure. This process of continuous innovation and improvement required a workforce that was engaged, creative, and invested in the success of the project. The seasonal nature of pyramid construction meant that this knowledge had to be preserved and transmitted across years and decades. When workers returned to their farms after each flood season, they took their expertise with them. But when they returned the following year, or when their sons joined the workforce years later, that knowledge had to be recovered and applied to new construction challenges. This created a remarkable system of informal education, where experienced workers trained newcomers not just in basic techniques, but in the accumulated wisdom of generations of pyramid builders. The training system that developed around pyramid construction was sophisticated enough to produce workers who could maintain incredibly high standards of precision and quality while working at unprecedented scales. The Great Pyramid contains over 2 million stone blocks, each weighing several tons, fitted together with joints so tight that a knife blade cannot be inserted between them. Achieving this level of precision required not just careful planning, but skilled execution by thousands of individual workers, each of whom had to understand their role in the larger project and perform their tasks to exacting standards. This level of skill development was possible only because the workers were motivated to learn and improve. Slaves forced to work under threat of punishment might achieve basic competency, but they would never develop the pride in craftsmanship and commitment to excellence that pyramid construction required. The evidence suggests that pyramid workers were motivated not by fear, but by a complex mixture of religious devotion, civic pride, competitive spirit, and professional satisfaction. Religious devotion played a particularly important role in motivating the workforce. The pyramids were not just monuments to individual pharaohs, but sacred structures that ensured the continued prosperity of Egypt itself. By participating in their construction, workers were performing a religious duty that would benefit not just the pharaoh, but their own communities and families. This religious dimension of the work helps explain the care and precision that went into every aspect of construction, even in areas that would never be seen by human eyes. The competitive spirit evident in the crew names and graffiti also provided powerful motivation for excellence. Work crews took pride not just in completing their assigned tasks, but in surpassing the achievements of rival crews. This competition drove innovation and improvement, as crews sought new ways to work more efficiently, more precisely, and more impressively than their competitors. The evidence suggests that successful crews gained recognition and status that extended beyond the construction sites, making participation in pyramid building a path to social advancement. But perhaps the most powerful motivation was the simple satisfaction of participating in one of humanity's greatest achievements. The workers who built the pyramids knew they were creating something unprecedented, something that would stand for millennia as a testament to human capability and determination. This knowledge infused their work with meaning and purpose that no amount of coercion could have provided. They were not just moving stones or earning wages. They were building monuments that would define their civilization for all time. The evidence for this sense of purpose can be found throughout the pyramid complexes, in the careful attention to details that no one would ever see, in the innovative solutions to construction challenges, and in the obvious pride that workers took in leaving their mark on these eternal monuments. The graffiti left by work crews is not the sullen marking of oppressed slaves, but the proud signature of craftsmen who wanted future generations to know who had accomplished this unprecedented feat. The pyramid workers were creating more than monuments. They were establishing traditions and techniques that would influence construction projects for millennia to come. The organizational methods developed for pyramid construction were adapted for other massive projects throughout Egyptian history. The training systems that produced skilled stoneworkers became the foundation for Egypt's renowned architectural traditions. The logistical networks that supplied the pyramid sites evolved into the trade routes that would make Egypt wealthy and powerful for centuries. In understanding who really built the pyramids, we discover not just the identity of these ancient workers, but something profound about human nature itself. The greatest achievements in human history have not been accomplished through oppression and fear, but through cooperation, skill, and shared purpose. The pyramids stand today not as monuments to the power of tyrants over slaves, but as testaments to what free people can accomplish when they work together toward a common goal that transcends their individual lives. The workers who built these eternal monuments were farmers and craftsmen, foreigners and natives, young men learning their trades and experienced masters passing on their knowledge. They were people much like ourselves, motivated by pride, competition, religious faith, and the desire to be part of something greater than themselves. In the desert silence around the pyramids, we can still hear the echo of their voices, calling across 4 millennia to remind us of what human hands and human hearts can accomplish when united in common purpose. The lives of these pyramid builders extended far beyond the monumental construction that made them famous. When the flood waters receded and the building season ended, these men returned to communities throughout Egypt, carrying with them not just wages and provisions, but stories that would shape Egyptian culture for generations. In villages along the Nile, fathers would gather their children around evening fires and speak of the great works rising from the desert sand. They described the thunderous sound of massive stones being moved into place, the sight of thousands of workers moving in coordinated precision, and the profound sense of participating in something that would outlast their own mortal lives. These stories became woven into the fabric of Egyptian society, creating a shared cultural memory that connected ordinary people to the grandest achievements of their civilization. Children who heard these tales grew up understanding that they too might one day contribute to works of lasting significance. The pyramid building tradition became, in essence, a form of national identity that bound together people from all corners of Egypt in common purpose and shared pride. But the influence of pyramid construction reached far beyond storytelling and cultural memory. The techniques and organizational methods developed during these massive projects revolutionized Egyptian society in ways that are still visible in the archaeological record. The precision measurement systems needed for pyramid construction led to advances in mathematics and engineering that found applications in agriculture, architecture, and trade. The logistical networks created to supply pyramid sites became the backbone of Egypt's internal commerce, connecting distant regions of the kingdom in ways that had never before been possible. The medical knowledge developed to care for injured workers represented one of the earliest systematic approaches to occupational health and safety. Egyptian physicians learned to treat the specific injuries that resulted from heavy construction work, developing techniques for setting broken bones, treating muscle strains, and managing the chronic joint problems that affected workers who spent years moving massive stones. This medical expertise spread throughout Egyptian society, improving healthcare for everyone and establishing Egypt's reputation as a center of medical learning that would persist for millennia. The seasonal rhythm of pyramid construction also had profound effects on Egyptian agriculture and rural life. Farmers who spent their flood seasons at construction sites returned to their fields with new tools, new techniques, and new perspectives on organization and cooperation. They applied lessons learned from coordinating massive work crews to organizing agricultural labor in their home communities. They introduced construction techniques to improve farm buildings and irrigation systems. They brought back mathematical knowledge that helped them calculate crop yields, plan planting schedules, and manage resources more efficiently. Perhaps most significantly, the pyramid building experience created networks of relationships that connected people across vast distances and social boundaries. Workers who had labored side by side during construction seasons maintained those relationships when they returned to their separate communities. These personal connections became channels for trade, communication, and cultural exchange that strengthened the unity of Egyptian civilization. A farmer from Upper Egypt who had worked alongside a craftsman from the Delta region might later send his son to apprentice with that craftsman's family. A Nubian worker who had impressed Egyptian foremen with his stone cutting skills might find opportunities for advancement that would have been impossible without those personal connections. These relationships created a social mobility that was remarkable for ancient societies, allowing talented individuals to rise based on their demonstrated abilities rather than their birth circumstances. The pyramid construction sites also served as informal universities where knowledge and skills were shared across cultural boundaries. Egyptian workers learned quarrying techniques from Nubian specialists and transportation methods from Levantine experts. Foreign workers absorbed Egyptian mathematical knowledge and organizational principles. This cross-cultural learning created a synthesis of techniques and ideas that made Egyptian civilization more sophisticated and adaptable than it would have been in isolation. The evidence for this knowledge exchange can be found in the evolution of Egyptian technology during the Pyramid Age. New tools appear in the archaeological record, tools that show clear influences from other cultures but have been adapted to Egyptian needs and preferences. Construction techniques become more sophisticated, incorporating innovations that can be traced to various foreign traditions but are implemented in distinctively Egyptian ways. Artistic styles evolved to include elements from across the ancient world, creating the distinctive Egyptian aesthetic that we recognize today. The workers themselves became carriers of this cultural synthesis, taking their expanded knowledge and skills to communities throughout Egypt and beyond. When construction seasons ended, workers returned not just to Egyptian villages, but to communities throughout the region, spreading Egyptian techniques and ideas while carrying foreign innovations back to Egypt. This created a network of cultural exchange centered on the pyramid construction sites that had effects far beyond the borders of Egypt itself. The scale of this cultural exchange becomes clear when we consider the logistics of pyramid construction. During peak construction periods, the Giza plateau housed what was essentially a temporary city larger than most permanent settlements of the ancient world. This city brought together people from dozens of different communities, each with their own traditions, techniques, and perspectives. The interactions between these diverse groups created a cosmopolitan environment that was unique in the ancient world. Managing such a diverse and temporary population required administrative innovations that influenced Egyptian governance for centuries to come. Officials developed new methods for record-keeping that tracked the comings and goings of thousands of workers. They created systems for distributing food and supplies that ensured fair treatment for people from different cultural backgrounds. They established rules and procedures for resolving disputes between workers from different communities and traditions. These administrative innovations were not limited to construction sites, but were adapted for use throughout Egyptian society. The record-keeping systems developed for tracking pyramid workers became models for tax collection and census taking. The supply distribution methods were applied to famine relief and military provisioning. The dispute resolution procedures were incorporated into Egyptian legal systems. In this way, the challenges of managing pyramid construction drove innovations in governance that strengthened Egyptian civilization as a whole. The temporary nature of the pyramid workforce also created unique social dynamics that challenged traditional hierarchies and relationships. During construction seasons, social distinctions that were rigid in normal Egyptian society became more fluid. A farmer who proved to be an exceptional organizer might find himself leading crews that included skilled craftsmen and foreign specialists. A young worker who demonstrated unusual skill or innovation might gain responsibilities and recognition that would be impossible in his home community. This social fluidity was carefully managed by Egyptian administrators, who recognized both its benefits and its dangers. They encouraged merit-based advancement that improved the efficiency of construction work, but they also maintained enough traditional structure to ensure that workers could return to their normal social roles when construction seasons ended. This balance between innovation and tradition became a hallmark of Egyptian civilization, allowing it to adapt and evolve while maintaining its essential character. The pyramid building experience also created a shared sense of Egyptian identity that transcended regional and cultural differences. Workers from different parts of Egypt and different cultural backgrounds found common ground in their shared participation in these monumental projects. They developed loyalty to their work crews that cut across traditional social boundaries. They took pride in Egyptian achievements that made them feel part of something greater than their individual communities. This shared identity was reinforced by the religious significance of the pyramids themselves. Workers understood that they were not just building monuments to individual pharaohs, but creating sacred structures that would ensure the continued prosperity of Egypt itself. This religious dimension of the work created a sense of common purpose that unified diverse groups in ways that political authority alone could never have achieved. The religious motivation for pyramid construction also helps explain the extraordinary quality and precision of the work. These were not merely construction projects, but acts of devotion that required the highest possible standards of craftsmanship. Workers took personal responsibility for the quality of their work, because they understood that shoddy construction would not just reflect poorly on them individually, but would compromise the sacred purpose of the entire project. This religious commitment to excellence created a culture of craftsmanship that influenced Egyptian society far beyond the pyramid sites. The standards of precision and quality developed for pyramid construction became expectations for all Egyptian building projects. The attention to detail and commitment to permanence that characterized pyramid work became defining features of Egyptian architecture and engineering. The religious understanding of work as service to the gods and the community became a fundamental aspect of Egyptian cultural values. The pyramid workers also developed a unique relationship with the pharaohs they served, a relationship that was more personal and direct than the typical subject-ruler dynamic of ancient societies. Workers left graffiti that addressed the pharaohs by name, often in familiar or even playful terms that would have been unthinkable in formal court settings. They expressed pride in their service to specific pharaohs and loyalty to the royal family that went beyond mere political obedience. This personal connection between workers and rulers created a form of social contract that was remarkably sophisticated for its time. Workers gave their labor and loyalty in exchange not just for wages and food, but for recognition, respect, and the opportunity to participate in projects of lasting significance. Pharaohs, in turn, were expected to provide not just material rewards, but leadership worthy of such dedication and projects worthy of such sacrifice. The evidence suggests that this social contract was generally honored by both sides. Workers received the promised compensation and recognition, as evidenced by their elaborate burials and the care taken to preserve their contributions in graffiti and inscriptions. Pharaohs, for their part, invested enormous resources in ensuring that workers were well fed, properly housed, and treated with dignity befitting their essential role in these monumental projects. This mutual respect and reciprocal obligation created a model of leadership and citizenship that influenced Egyptian political culture for centuries. Later pharaohs were expected to justify their rule not just through divine authority, but through their ability to inspire and organize great works that served the entire community. Egyptian workers, in turn, developed expectations of fair treatment and meaningful participation in the projects that defined their civilization. The pyramid building tradition also created a form of collective memory that preserved knowledge and techniques across generations. When construction of one pyramid was completed, experienced workers carried their expertise to the next project, ensuring continuity of methods and standards. This created a living tradition of craftsmanship that could adapt and improve over time while maintaining the essential qualities that made Egyptian construction so distinctive and enduring. The preservation of this collective memory was facilitated by the family and community networks that connected pyramid workers to the broader Egyptian society. Sons learned techniques from fathers who had worked on earlier pyramids. Entire families developed specializations that were passed down through generations. Communities took pride in their contributions to specific pyramids and maintained traditions that honored the achievements of their members who had participated in these great works. This generational continuity helps explain how Egyptian civilization maintained its distinctive character and high standards of achievement over such a long period. The pyramid building tradition created institutional knowledge that transcended individual lives and specific projects, ensuring that each new generation could build upon the achievements of their predecessors while adding their own innovations and improvements. The workers who built the pyramids also developed sophisticated understanding of the materials they worked with that went far beyond simple manual labor. Each type of stone required different techniques for cutting, shaping, and placement. The limestone blocks that formed the majority of pyramid construction had to be quarried with precision that minimized waste while maximizing the usable stone from each extraction. Workers learned to read the grain and structure of limestone deposits, identifying the best locations for cutting and the optimal methods for removing large blocks without fracturing. The granite used in interior chambers and casing stones presented entirely different challenges. This incredibly hard stone had to be quarried in Aswan, hundreds of miles south of the pyramid sites, then transported down the Nile during flood season, when the river was high enough to carry the massive barges needed for such heavy cargo. Workers developed specialized techniques for cutting granite using copper tools, sand abrasives, and wooden wedges that could split stone along natural fault lines with remarkable precision. The transportation of these massive stones from quarry to construction site represented one of the most impressive logistical achievements of the ancient world. Workers created elaborate systems of ramps, sledges, and rollers that could move blocks weighing several tons across desert terrain and up the rising sides of the pyramids themselves. The ramps had to be carefully engineered to provide the right angle of ascent while remaining stable enough to support the weight of massive stones and the crews of workers hauling them into position. Archaeological evidence suggests that different pyramid construction projects experimented with various ramp designs, each adapted to the specific challenges of particular sites and construction phases. Some ramps were built as straight inclines leading directly up the pyramid faces. Others were constructed as spiral ramps that wrapped around the pyramid structure as it rose. Still others used a combination of approaches, with different ramp systems for different phases of construction. The workers who operated these transportation systems developed remarkable expertise in coordinating the movement of heavy objects. Moving a single massive block required the synchronized effort of dozens of workers, all pulling or pushing at exactly the right moment and with precisely the right force. This coordination was achieved through work songs and rhythmic chants that helped workers synchronize their efforts while maintaining morale during the exhausting work of hauling multi-ton stones up steep inclines. The precision required for final placement of pyramid stones was even more demanding than their transportation. Each block had to be positioned exactly where it belonged in the overall structure, fitted tightly against its neighbors, and aligned perfectly with the mathematical principles that governed pyramid construction. This work required not just physical strength, but mathematical understanding, spatial reasoning, and the ability to work with measuring tools and geometric principles that were sophisticated for their time. Workers developed specialized tools for this precision work, including plumb lines for ensuring vertical alignment, squares for checking right angles, and measuring rods calibrated to Egyptian units of measurement. They learned to use these tools not just individually, but as part of coordinated teams where each worker's measurements had to align perfectly with those of his colleagues. The tolerances were so tight that errors of even a few inches at the base of a pyramid would compound as construction proceeded, eventually making it impossible to achieve the perfect geometric form that pyramid construction required. The mathematical knowledge required for pyramid construction was distributed throughout the workforce in ways that challenge our assumptions about ancient societies. While master architects and engineers certainly planned the overall structure and established the key measurements and angles, ordinary workers had to understand enough geometry and arithmetic to execute their specific tasks correctly. They needed to calculate angles for ramp construction, determine the proper spacing for stone placement, and ensure that their work aligned with the broader mathematical principles governing the entire project. This mathematical literacy among construction workers had profound effects on Egyptian society as a whole. Workers who returned to their home communities brought with them practical knowledge of geometry, measurement, and calculation that found applications in agriculture, trade, and local construction projects. Farmers used geometric principles learned at pyramid sites to design more efficient irrigation systems and calculate optimal field layouts. Merchants applied mathematical skills to more accurate accounting and inventory management. The spread of mathematical knowledge through the pyramid workforce also contributed to Egypt's reputation as a center of learning and scholarship. Foreign visitors to Egypt were impressed not just by the monumental architecture, but by the mathematical sophistication evident throughout Egyptian society. This reputation attracted scholars and students from across the ancient world, making Egypt a hub of intellectual exchange that enriched its civilization in countless ways. The seasonal rhythm of pyramid construction created unique opportunities for knowledge exchange and innovation that would have been impossible in permanent work arrangements. Each construction season brought together experienced workers who had developed expertise on previous projects with newcomers who brought fresh perspectives and techniques from their home communities. This constant mixing of experience and innovation created an environment of continuous learning and improvement. Workers who had mastered particular techniques during previous construction seasons became informal teachers for newcomers, passing on not just basic skills, but the accumulated wisdom of years of pyramid building experience. This teaching was not formal or structured, but emerged naturally from the cooperative nature of construction work. Experienced workers took pride in mentoring newcomers, knowing that the success of the entire project depended on the skills and competence of every member of the workforce. The competitive spirit between work crews also drove innovation and improvement in construction techniques. Crews that developed more efficient methods for cutting stone, moving blocks, or achieving precision placement gained recognition and status that motivated other crews to develop their own innovations. This competition created a dynamic environment where techniques were constantly being refined and improved, leading to construction methods that became increasingly sophisticated over time. The evidence for this continuous innovation can be seen in the evolution of pyramid construction techniques across the different projects at Giza and other sites. Earlier pyramids show clear signs of experimentation and learning, with construction methods that were refined and perfected in later projects. The Great Pyramid represents the culmination of this learning process, incorporating techniques and innovations that had been developed and tested over decades of construction experience. But innovation was not limited to construction techniques alone. Workers also developed new approaches to organization, communication, and problem-solving that had applications far beyond pyramid construction. They learned to coordinate the efforts of large, diverse groups working on complex tasks with multiple interdependent components. They developed methods for quality control that ensured consistent standards across different work crews and construction phases. They created systems for resource allocation that balanced efficiency with fairness in ways that maintained morale and cooperation among thousands of workers. These organizational innovations were as important as the technical achievements of pyramid construction and had lasting effects on Egyptian civilization. The administrative systems developed for managing pyramid construction became models for organizing other large-scale projects throughout Egyptian history. The coordination methods used to synchronize work crews were adapted for military organization and agricultural management. The quality control procedures developed for pyramid construction influenced standards for Egyptian craftsmanship in all fields. The workers who participated in pyramid construction also developed a unique form of professional identity that transcended their primary occupations as farmers, craftsmen, or laborers. During construction seasons, they became members of a specialized community with its own traditions, values, and standards of excellence. This professional identity persisted even when they returned to their normal occupations, creating networks of relationships and shared experiences that connected people across Egypt's diverse communities. This professional identity was reinforced by the distinctive skills and knowledge that pyramid workers developed, skills that were valuable and transferable to other contexts. A farmer who had learned precision measurement techniques during pyramid construction could apply those skills to more accurate field surveys and irrigation planning. A craftsman who had mastered stone cutting methods could use that expertise for local building projects and sculptural work. A laborer who had developed expertise in coordinating group efforts could become a valuable leader in his home community. The transferability of pyramid construction skills created opportunities for social and economic advancement that were remarkable for ancient societies. Workers who distinguished themselves during construction seasons often found opportunities for permanent employment in related fields, becoming professional stoneworkers, construction supervisors, or technical specialists serving wealthy patrons throughout Egypt. Some established their own workshops and training centers, passing on their expertise to new generations of craftsmen and creating family traditions of specialized knowledge. The pyramid construction experience also created a shared vocabulary and set of professional standards that influenced Egyptian craftsmanship for centuries. Terms and concepts developed during pyramid construction became standard throughout Egyptian building trades. Quality standards established for pyramid work became expectations for all Egyptian construction projects. Methods and techniques perfected at pyramid sites were adapted and refined for use in temples, palaces, and other monumental architecture throughout Egyptian history. The cultural impact of pyramid construction extended far beyond technical and professional considerations to influence Egyptian art, literature, and religious expression. The experience of participating in these monumental projects became a source of inspiration for artists and writers who celebrated the achievements of ordinary people working together to accomplish extraordinary things. Stories and songs about pyramid construction became part of Egyptian cultural tradition, preserving not just historical memory, but values and ideals that defined Egyptian civilization. The religious significance of pyramid construction also influenced Egyptian spiritual life in ways that persisted long after the pyramid building era ended. The understanding of work as sacred service, the emphasis on precision and excellence as forms of devotion, and the connection between individual effort and cosmic purpose became fundamental aspects of Egyptian religious culture. These spiritual dimensions of work influenced Egyptian attitudes toward all forms of labor and craftsmanship, creating a culture that valued skill, dedication, and service to the community. The pyramid workers created more than monuments in stone. They established traditions of cooperation, excellence, and shared purpose that became defining characteristics of Egyptian civilization. Their achievements demonstrated what ordinary people could accomplish when united by common goals and supported by effective organization. Their example inspired future generations of Egyptians to undertake ambitious projects and maintain high standards of craftsmanship and community service. In the silence of the desert night, as the ancient stones continue their eternal vigil, we can still sense the presence of these remarkable people, whose hands shaped wonders that have outlasted empires, and whose spirit continues to inspire us across the millennia. Their story reminds us that the greatest human achievements emerge not from the commands of tyrants, but from the willing cooperation of free people working together toward goals that transcend their individual lives and connect them to something eternal and magnificent. The legacy of these ancient builders extends into realms we are only beginning to understand through modern archaeological techniques. Recent discoveries have revealed that the pyramid workers possessed knowledge systems that were far more sophisticated than previously imagined. Deep within the worker settlements, archaeologists have uncovered evidence of astronomical observations that suggest these laborers were not merely following orders, but actively participating in the complex calculations required for pyramid construction. Stone tablets found in what appear to be worker education areas contain mathematical exercises and geometric problems that would challenge modern students. These were not the crude scratches of illiterate laborers, but the careful notations of people engaged in serious intellectual work. The tablets show calculations for determining angles, computing volumes, and solving practical problems related to stone cutting and transportation. More remarkably, they demonstrate that mathematical knowledge was being taught and shared among the workforce in systematic ways. The astronomical knowledge evident in these tablets reveals another dimension of pyramid construction that challenges our understanding of ancient capabilities. Workers had to understand the movement of stars and the changing positions of celestial bodies to achieve the precise alignments that characterize pyramid architecture. The Great Pyramid is aligned to cardinal directions, with an accuracy that varies by only a few arc minutes from perfect orientation. Achieving such precision required not just sophisticated measuring instruments, but workers who understood how to use astronomical observations for practical construction purposes. This astronomical knowledge was not confined to a small elite, but was distributed among work crews who needed to understand star positions for night work and seasonal timing. Graffiti found throughout the pyramids includes references to stellar observations and calculations that suggest ordinary workers were tracking celestial movements as part of their regular duties. Some inscriptions appear to be astronomical records kept by work crews to coordinate their activities with seasonal changes and religious festivals. The integration of astronomical knowledge into practical construction work represents one of humanity's earliest examples of applied science on a massive scale. Workers were not just moving stones according to predetermined plans, but were actively engaged in ongoing calculations and observations that required sophisticated understanding of mathematics, astronomy, and engineering principles. This scientific approach to construction helps explain how the pyramids achieved levels of precision that remained unmatched for millennia. But the scientific achievements of pyramid construction extended beyond mathematics and astronomy to include innovations in materials science and engineering that influenced technological development throughout the ancient world. Workers developed new techniques for working with different types of stone that required understanding of material properties, stress distribution, and structural engineering principles that would not be formally codified for thousands of years. The mortar used in pyramid construction, for example, was not simply mud or clay, but a carefully formulated mixture that created bonds between stone blocks stronger than the stones themselves. Analysis of this mortar reveals a sophisticated understanding of chemical processes and material properties that allowed workers to create permanent connections between massive blocks without modern adhesives or binding agents. The formula for this mortar was developed through experimentation and refinement by workers who understood the relationship between different ingredients and their effects on binding strength and durability. The precision cutting of stone blocks also required innovations in tool design and manufacturing that pushed the boundaries of ancient metallurgy and engineering. Workers developed specialized tools for different types of stone and different phases of construction work. Copper tools were hardened through techniques that increased their effectiveness for cutting limestone. Bronze implements were designed with specific angles and edges, optimized for particular tasks. Wooden tools were engineered with leverages and mechanical advantages that multiplied human strength for moving massive objects. These tool innovations were not the work of isolated inventors, but emerged from the collective problem-solving efforts of thousands of workers confronting practical challenges in their daily work. A worker struggling to cut stone more efficiently would experiment with different tool shapes and techniques. Successful innovations would be shared with other workers and refined through further experimentation. Over time, these individual innovations accumulated into sophisticated tool systems that dramatically increased the effectiveness of human labor. The collaborative nature of technological innovation during pyramid construction created a dynamic environment where new ideas were constantly being tested, refined, and disseminated. Workers from different cultural backgrounds brought different approaches to common problems, creating opportunities for cross-fertilization of ideas and techniques. Egyptian workers learned from foreign specialists while contributing their own innovations to the collective knowledge base. This technological collaboration was facilitated by the temporary nature of pyramid construction, which brought together workers who would normally have had little contact with each other. A stone cutter from Upper Egypt might work alongside a transportation specialist from Nubia and a precision measurement expert from the Delta region. Each would learn from the others while contributing his own expertise to the common effort. When construction seasons ended and workers returned to their home communities, they carried with them not just their original skills, but the accumulated innovations of the entire workforce. The spread of technological innovation through the pyramid workforce had profound effects on Egyptian society and the broader ancient world. Techniques developed for pyramid construction were adapted for other building projects throughout Egypt and beyond. Tool innovations spread through trade networks to influence craftsmanship in distant regions. Mathematical and astronomical knowledge developed by pyramid workers became the foundation for Egyptian scholarly traditions that would influence learning throughout the Mediterranean world. The evidence for this technological diffusion can be found in archaeological sites throughout the region, where construction techniques, tool designs, and mathematical concepts that originated in pyramid construction appear in local contexts adapted to different needs and materials. A temple built in Nubia might incorporate stone cutting techniques developed at Giza, A palace in the Levant might use transportation methods perfected by pyramid workers. A fortress in Libya might employ mathematical principles first applied to pyramid construction. But technology transfer was not a one-way process. Workers from different regions also brought their own innovations to pyramid construction, creating a synthesis of techniques and approaches that made Egyptian construction methods more sophisticated and effective than any single tradition could have achieved alone. Nubian quarrying techniques were combined with Levantine transportation methods and Egyptian mathematical principles to create construction systems that were more advanced than anything that had existed before. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the sands of time to discover the true builders of the pyramids. Tonight, we have walked alongside the forgotten thousands whose hands shaped these eternal monuments, whose names are carved in ancient stone, and whose legacy extends far beyond the limestone blocks they so carefully placed. We have learned that these were not slaves driven by the whip, but skilled workers, proud craftsmen, and dedicated citizens who chose to be part of something greater than themselves. Their story reminds us that humanity's greatest achievements have always emerged from cooperation, ingenuity, and shared purpose. As you drift into peaceful sleep tonight, may you carry with you the voices of these ancient builders, echoing across 4 millennia to inspire us all. Until we meet again in the shadows of history, I wish you the most restful of nights.